few weeks or so, the so-called Christian world will be enmeshed in a web of deception and untruth that was woven thousands of years ago. It was formalized, handed down, and cemented into tradition and popular religion by a great empire that experienced a transformation and now had the word holy attached to his name. Interestingly, brethren, the Bible spoke of this transformed empire as daring to change times and laws, referring to God's times and laws. And one of the times this transformed empire has dared to change is the time of the spring season, La Primavera, and the law relating to the Passover and its observance. And for hundreds of years, popular Christianity has followed its edicts and indoctrinated billions of followers into a humongous lie about both the crucifixion and the resurrection of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. So today, brethren, I'd like to take a look at the truth of the Bible regarding the crucifixion and resurrection of Christ, and in the process, expose the lies and the distortions surrounding both events. First, let us note that popular Christianity has changed the crucifixion of Christ into a specific day of the week, that is a Friday, that the religion spawned by that empire calls Good Friday. But what does God say, brethren? What does the Bible say? Let us go to the book of Exodus. Exodus chapter 12. See what it says. Exodus chapter 12, and let's go from verse 2. It's a long chapter. It says, "This month shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you." And let's drop down to verse 6. It says, "And you shall keep it until," referring to a lamb here, "you shall keep it up until the 14th day of the same month. And the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it in the evening," referring to a lamb that they were given instructions to sacrifice. And let's drop down to verse 12. It says, "For I will pass through the land of Egypt this night, and will smite all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and against all the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment. I am the Lord. And the blood shall be to you for a token upon the houses where you are, and when I see the blood, I will pass over you, and the plague shall not be upon you to destroy you when I smite the land of Egypt. And this day shall be unto you for memorial, and you shall keep it a feast to the Lord throughout your generations. You shall keep it a feast by an ordinance forever." So here we see a particular day being designated by God, the 14th day of the first month. So that day is fixed. It does not change. The date is fixed. The day may change, but not the date. And let us go to Leviticus 23. And let's go from verse 4. It says, "These are the feasts of the Lord, even holy convocations, which you shall proclaim in their seasons." And verse 5, "In the 14th day of the first month at even is the Lord's Passover." So now we see when the Passover is to be observed. And let's go to Matthew chapter 26 and see the New Testament equivalent. Matthew 26 and verse 2. It says, "You know that after 2 days is the feast of the Passover, and the Son of Man is betrayed to be crucified." And let's drop down to verse 17. It says, "Now the first day of the feast of unleavened bread, the disciples came to Jesus, saying to him, 'Where wilt thou that we prepare for thee to eat the Passover?' And he said, 'Go into the city to such a man and say unto him, The master said, My time is at hand. I will keep the Passover at thy house with my disciples.' And the disciples did as Jesus had appointed them, and they made ready the Passover." So again, we see a specific time is being dictated here by Christ. Let's go to 1 Corinthians chapter 5. 1 Corinthians chapter 5. And we're going to look at verse 7. Now specifically referring to the days of unleavened bread. He says, "Purge out the old leaven, that you may be a new lump, as you are unleavened." And note this, "For even Christ, or Passover, is sacrificed for us." So we had in the Old Testament it was a lamb. In the New Testament, Christ is going to be sacrificed. And let's go to chapter 11, 1 Corinthians 11, and let's go from verse 23. Paul writing, and he says, "For I have received of the Lord that which I also delivered unto you, that the Lord Jesus, the same night in which he was betrayed, took bread. And when he had given thanks, he broke it and said, Take, eat this. Eat, this is my body, which is broken for you. This do in remembrance of me. And after the same manner also he took the cup when he had supped, saying, This cup is the New Testament in my blood. This do ye, as oft as you drink it, in remembrance of me." And verse 27. 26, it says, "For as often as you eat this bread and drink this cup, you do show the Lord's death till he comes. Wherefore, whosoever shall eat this bread and drink this cup of the Lord unworthily shall be guilty of the body and blood of the Lord." So here we see an equivalent ceremony being instituted in the New Testament by Christ to replace the one that took place with Israel. And here's where the empire changed the times of God by changing when God says a day begins. How so? He says on the 14th day at even. Let's see what God says. Let's go back to Genesis chapter 1. See how God says a day begins. And ends in Genesis 1 verse 3. "And God said, Let there be light, and there was light. And God saw that the light was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day." And it goes along like this. You drop down to verse 8, it says, "And the evening and morning were the second day." And you drop down again, and it says, "The evening and the morning were the third day," and so on until the end of the week. The evening and the morning is how God decides a day functions and how a day operates. But what happens? God says days begin at sunset. What does the empire say? It changed that to midnight. Days now begin at midnight instead of at sunset. And this has introduced, brethren, another massive deception. from which popular Christianity cannot escape as a result. And that is, how long did Christ stay in the grave? But more of that later. Now we saw that the Passover was to be observed on the 14th day of the first month. But the day of the week on which it falls changes. So for example, your birthday, it maintains the same calendar reference. But the day of the week on which it falls changes from year to year. Anyone whose birthday this year falls on the same day it did last year, can I see your hand? And the year before, and the year before. Doesn't happen. But in this particular day, that Christ's death, it never changes. It is always a Friday. But strangely enough, his supposed birthday changes every year. But not the day that he was supposed to be crucified on, the day of his death. Why is that? Because this empire has changed it. Let's look at some dates on which the Passover fell according to the church's holy calendar. I'm going to ask Steffi to put up some dates here. Fortunately, I happen to get now we see the list continuously. 2003, April 16. It's a Wednesday. April the 4th, April 2004, the 5th of April, a Monday. 2005, the day is April 23rd, a Saturday. 2006, we see April 12th. It's a Wednesday. 2007, April the 2nd, that's the day of the Passover. It's a Monday. 2008, the date is April 19th, a Saturday. I'm doing this for the benefit of anyone who might not be able to view. 2009, April 8th, that's the Passover, it's a Wednesday. 2010, March the 25th, it's a Monday. Oh, sorry, March the 29th, it's a Monday. 2011, April 18th, another Monday. 2012, April the 6th, Friday. 2013, we see March the 25th, a Monday. And 2014, the Passover is April 14th, a Monday. So in all of these, 2, 4, 6, 12 days for the Passover in 12 consecutive years. Only on one day, the Passover fell on a Friday. So how is it that popular Christianity has it that every single year the Passover falls, or for them, the day Christ was crucified, falls on a Friday and never changes? That is because this religion took it upon itself to change times. Also notice this, the Passover never falls on a Tuesday, a Thursday, nor a Sunday. So how did this church that the empire developed come up with a Friday? That date was ordained at the Council of Nicaea in AD 325, where the empire's church dictated Easter, that it substituted for the Passover, will be observed the Sunday following the full moon, after the vernal equinox, when spring comes in, which falls on March 21st. And for Christians, Sunday was to be used to celebrate Christ's resurrection instead of observing the Jewish Passover. That is what this church dictated at the Council of Nicaea way back in AD 325. See how long ago that was? Some say the observance of, quote-unquote, Holy Thursday in Holy Week suggests that the authorities knew that Christ was put in the tomb just before Thursday night of the week he was crucified. That's why they called it Holy Thursday. But in accepting the Good Friday deception, brethren, about when Christ died, popular Christianity has ignored a number of things. Firstly, it has ignored what Christ himself said about his death. Let's go to Matthew chapter 12. Christ is speaking about himself now. And nobody can speak for you as well as you can, except perhaps if you're in a court. Matthew 12, and let's go from verse 39. It says, verse 38 says, Then certain of the scribes and of the Pharisees answered, saying, Master, we would like to see a sign from you, that you are who you say you are. But Christ answered and said unto them, An evil and adulterous generation seeks after a sign. And there shall be no sign be given to it, but the sign of the prophet Jonas. For as Jonas was 3 days and 3 nights, no, 3 days and 3 nights, in the whale's belly, or the fish's belly, so shall the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. That is what Christ said about himself regarding his burial and period in the grave, how long he would remain dead. But popular Christianity, following this church of the empire, has twisted itself into all sorts of knots, distorting Christ's words. Because they refuse to accept the truth that Christ gave, they now have to manufacture ways that a Friday crucifixion and an Easter Sunday morning resurrection can be made to fit into the distortion that they came up with. First of all, they tried to say that any part of a day is to be counted as a day. So, okay, so let's suppose now an ancient Israelite is arguing with God that he isn't breaking the Sabbath. Could he say to God, hey, I kept 30 minutes of this day perfectly. I didn't work, I didn't do anything, I didn't do my own words, I kept 30 minutes, didn't do anything. Wrong. And since any part of a day can be counted as a day, I did not break the Sabbath. Now, do you think God would accept that argument? If part of a day can be counted as a day, and this is what they are telling us that Christ meant, then why would Christ, the same Christ, not accept that from an Israelite in those days? Do you think he would accept that? No. Or do you see any self-respecting Jew accepting the argument that his employee could work for half an hour and claim a full day's pay? But that is an argument that is raised, and I suppose they're serious with it. Now, using that argument, a few minutes on Good Friday would be counted as a whole day. All day Saturday, day and the night, would be considered another full day. And a few minutes on Sunday gives you 3 days and 3 nights, according to the advocates of that theory. Now, can any intelligent person really accept that? Know that there are really only 2 periods that can be called night and day. That is the Friday night and on the Saturday night. Christ rose on Easter Sunday morning according to their theology, so that rules out Sunday night. They can't include Sunday night. They only have 2 nights, Friday night and Saturday night. But Christ said 3 days and 3 nights. Then they came up with another argument, that the Jews counted inclusively. But everybody counts inclusively, but only when you're beginning with 1. So you say 1, 2, 3, and you got 3. But let's suppose your employer is paying you, and he says, okay, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000. That's your salary, $4,000. Would you accept that? That's what happens when you count inclusively from 2. You say 2, 3, 4. But when you count from 1, it is 1, 2, 3. And to get 4,000, you have to say 1, 2, 3, 4. But when you count inclusively and you count from 2, you get in 2, 3, 4. So here's $4,000. He really only gives you $3,000. So again, another bogus argument that they used. So then they came up with an even more farcical explanation. 3 days and 3 nights is really a figure of speech. That doesn't really mean 72 hours. But exactly what does it mean then? Nobody can tell you. But here's how God counts. As it says in Genesis, God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And the evening and the morning were the first day. And the evening and the morning were the second day. And the evening and the morning were the third day. So, counting just 3 days, the way God counts. We have 3 periods called evening or night, and morning or daylight, 3 periods. So does God know how to count, brethren? Or does he have to rely on the Jews to teach him how to count inclusively? Or to use figures of speech? Now remember, God is a mathematician of all mathematicians. There's no mathematician or any group of mathematicians who can compare with God, but he can't count from 1 to 3. This is what this is implying. God can't count, but the Jews could count, God can't count. So when God says 3 days and 3 nights, it doesn't really mean that. The Jews count differently from God. Here's what Christ himself said. In John chapter 11 and verse 9. Jesus answered, he said, are there not 12 hours in a day? If any man walks in the day, he stumbles not, because he sees the light of this world. So Christ knows how long is the period called day. And likewise, what would be the period called darkness or nighttime. So that Christ did not know what he was speaking about, obviously, is a fraud. He is confirming that there are a certain number of hours in a day because he instituted it. He made the days. He regulated how long the earth takes to spin on its axis. I mean, it could spin faster or slower if he chose to make it happen that way. And this next statement by Christ, when he said, after 2 days was the Passover, according to the way these people reckon it, would mean the Passover was next day. He counting inclusively today and the next day. That would be 2 days. So the next day would be the Passover. But that is not what he intended. 2 days would mean 2 days from today. So one day, the next day, and after the next day, meaning on the third day, is when the Passover would be. But that is how the distortion goes. Note this exchange between the Pharisees and Pilate. Matthew chapter 27. Another long chapter here. And let's drop down to verse 63. Jump back up to verse 63. It says, "Now the next day that followed the day of the preparation, the chief priests and Pharisees came together unto Pilate, saying, Sir, we remember that the deceiver said while he was yet alive, After 3 days I will rise again. Command therefore that the sepulchre be made sure until the 3rd day, lest the disciples come by night and steal him away, and say that he is risen from the dead. Say unto the people that he is risen from the dead. So the last error shall be worse than the first. And Pilate said unto them, You have a watch, go your way and make it as sure as you can. Now, how would the guards know how long to stay, to keep the watch? Because a few minutes of a day is a day. And a few minutes into the 3rd day, maybe an hour, by out here for however long. I see my family for however long, feeling kind of drowsy. I don't know. So 1 hour in the 3rd day pass, he and rise. So it's a whole day. And they leave and they go home. You think that is what the authorities would have accepted? Because the Jews, as they tell us, counted inclusively. So part of a day is a day, I spend an hour, and therefore I could go home. If that were true, they could have left a few minutes on the 3rd day, after a few minutes. And then say, well, Christ, he didn't rise. The disciples did not steal him away. But they stayed until the 3rd day, the Sabbath, until the Sabbath was passed. Because they were still there when Christ was resurrected. How did they know to do that? So we see the lie that they counted inclusively. Because they knew when he was put in the grave. And they said, well, this deceiver said he would rise the 3rd day. So why not stay 1 hour into the 3rd day? Why wait until he was resurrected? Because they know that argument is a lie. They stayed until the Sabbath was passed. And apparently were prepared to stay until the very next day, just to make sure that Christ's disciples didn't steal his body and claim he was risen. So the question is, brethren, was Christ in the grave for 72 hours? How do we know? Popular Christianity says he wasn't. He was crucified on Good Friday, resurrected Easter Sunday morning. Good Friday in the evening, that is one night. The Saturday, one day, not even one night. And Christianity, popular Christianity says he got resurrected Easter Sunday morning when the sun was rising, which is why they have resurrection services. So popular Christianity says he did not stay in the tomb for 72 hours. So how do we know? Well, notice this, as I said earlier before, Passover never falls on a Tuesday, a Thursday, or a Sunday. That only leaves Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday for the Passover to fall. But the week Christ was crucified, it couldn't fall on a Monday or Saturday, because that would mean Christ would rise during the week. If he was crucified on a Monday and he was going to be there 3 days and 3 nights, he would have to rise before the Sabbath, long before. So he couldn't be crucified on a Monday. If he was crucified on a Saturday, he would have to be in the tomb until the Monday. However you want to figure it out. He would be there Saturday, he would be there Sunday, and sometime on Monday. So he couldn't be crucified on any of those days. That leaves 2 days. 2 days. Wednesday and the Friday. Let's pick Friday according to popular Christianity. Could Christ have been crucified on a Friday? Let's look at Mark chapter 15. Mark 15. And let's go from verse 40. It says, there were also women looking on afar off, among whom was Mary Magdalene and Mary the mother of James the Less, and of Joseph, and of Salome. And of Salome, who also, when he was in Galilee, followed him and ministered unto him, and many other women who came up with him unto Jerusalem. And verse 42 it says, and now when the even was come, because it was the preparation, that is, the day before the Sabbath, Joseph of Arimathea, an honorable counselor, who also waited for the kingdom of God, came and went in boldly unto Pilate, and begged for the body of Christ. Note this. The preparation day, that is the day before the Sabbath. So, the preparation day, that's what they normally refer to as the day before the Sabbath. In other words, the Passover, the day that Christ was crucified, is being called the preparation day. Let's do a little interactive here. Does a Sabbath immediately follow the Passover? What do you think? Does a Sabbath immediately follow the Passover? Yes or no? Yes, a Sabbath. What Sabbath is that? The first day of unleavened bread. How long after the Passover does the first day of unleavened bread fall? The next day. So when it says they were waiting for the Sabbath, he was crucified one day, and the next day was going to be a Sabbath. So the Sabbath that is referred to here is not the 7-day Sabbath, but the first holy day, the first day of unleavened bread. Let's just check Leviticus 23, just to convince you, or to cement it, to show you from the Bible what it says. Leviticus 23. And verse 4. Let's go from verse 4. It says, these are the feasts of the Lord, even holy convocations, which you shall proclaim in their seasons. In the 14th day of the first month at even is the Lord's Passover. We just established that. And on the 15th day, so immediately following the 14th day, is the feast of unleavened bread unto the Lord. 7 days you must eat unleavened bread. And verse 7. In the first day, or on the 15th day, you shall have an holy convocation. You shall do no servile work therein. But you shall offer an offering made by fire unto the Lord, and 7 days in it you shall, in the 7 days also an holy convocation. So the 15th day was a Sabbath. So when the Bible tells us here, and it refers here to the Sabbath drew on. It is the first day of unleavened bread. But popular Christianity despises, as it says, as Paul says, despises the feast of the Lord. That is Jewish stuff. You know, it is rituals, and, you know, they sneer at it. And so they don't know that the Sabbath being referred to is not the 7-day Sabbath. Even Sabbath-keeping churches don't know that. The moment they hear the preparation day, they're thinking about Friday. Which is why all of the churches of the world follow the Good Friday tradition. Every single one. Whether they observe the Sabbath or not, they follow the Good Friday tradition. And so they fall into the same mire as the Empire's church. Let's note Luke chapter 23. Luke 23. And let's go from verse 50. Getting some long chapters here. Luke 23 verse 50, it says, "And behold, there was a man named Joseph, a counselor, and he was a good man, and a just man. The same had not consented to counsel and deed of them." He didn't agree with what was done. "He was of Arimathea, the city of the Jews, who also himself waited for the kingdom of God. This man went unto Pilate and begged for the body of Jesus. And he took it down and wrapped it in linen and laid it in a sepulchre that was hewn in stone, wherein no one had ever been placed before. And that day, the day Christ was crucified, was the preparation. So the same day Christ got crucified is the preparation. And the Sabbath drew on. The first day of unleavened bread drew on. Now the Jews had a tradition whereby they kept the Passover later. So for them, it was the Passover that they also had to rush and go do. And they couldn't defile themselves having touched a dead body and go take the Passover, the Old Testament Passover that they were accustomed to. The day that drew on was the preparation, was the Sabbath drew on, and the women also who came with him from Galilee beheld the sepulchre and how his body was laid. And they returned and prepared spices and ointments and rested the Sabbath day. Now this is actually giving you two different time frames here. Because on the day that Christ was crucified, they didn't have time to go prepare any spices. They were there at Golgotha, as they say. They watched his execution and they watched his body being taken down. Now no time to go and prepare spices. When that was done, they just had to leave and go home because the Passover, the Sabbath, drew on. So this is a little bit of a ambiguity here. This isn't referring to the same Sabbath here. But we'll take a note of verse 56. And we'll come back to that later. John chapter 19. John 19 and verse 31. It tells us that the Sabbath referred to was an high day. It says, "The Jews therefore, because it was the preparation that the body should not remain upon the cross on the Sabbath day, for that Sabbath day, the day after Christ was crucified, was an high day, the first day of unleavened bread, besought Pilate that their legs might be broken, that they might be taken away." So they were all there looking on at this and had no time to go prepare any spices. They had no spices because they didn't know he would have been killed that day. Mark 16:6 tells us, when the Sabbath was past, the women bought sweet spices to anoint Christ's body. Let's just take a look at that so you can fix it in your mind. Mark 16 and verse 6. It tells us here, and he said unto them, Be not affrighted. You seek Jesus of Nazareth, which was crucified. He is risen. He is not here. I think maybe I might have written the wrong thing. Let me see. Okay, Mark 16 and verse 1. Sorry. It says, when the Sabbath was passed, again, the Sabbath here is not the seventh-day Sabbath. When the Sabbath was passed, Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James and Salome, had bought sweet spices, that they might come and anoint him. When the Sabbath was passed, the first day of unleavened bread. Because if they had waited until the seventh-day Sabbath to go and buy spices, they would have had no time to prepare it, because Christ would have left the tomb a long time. So they bought spices and had time to prepare it. So the Sabbath we're referring here is again the first day of unleavened bread. After that was done, they went and they bought spices to prepare. But then Luke tells us in verse 56 that they prepared spices and ointments and rested on the Sabbath day. How to figure that out? Mark is telling us when it was past, they went and they bought spices. But here's what Luke is telling us. Luke 23. Let's go back to Luke 23 and 56. And they returned and prepared spices and ointments and rested the Sabbath day according to the commandment. So Mark is telling us when the Sabbath was passed, they went and they bought spices. And Luke is telling us they bought the spices and rested on the Sabbath, which means the Sabbath ain't passed yet. How is that? Because they're referring to two different things. There was more than one Sabbath that week. There was more than one Sabbath. The first Sabbath was the first day of unleavened week, the day after Christ was crucified, or the day after the Passover. That's what we read in Mark 16. So that's how they could go buy spices and then go home and look to prepare it, because Christ is not yet risen. Otherwise, why buy spices? Then they returned home, prepared the spices and the ointment. That takes a long time, a lot of work. So when did they do that? It couldn't be in what Luke 56 says. It seems to suggest. Because the Sabbath was already drawing on when they laid Christ's body in the tomb. So they couldn't do it at that point in time. It was after the first day of unleavened bread. The day following is not a holy day, so they went that day. They bought spices, went home, and started to prepare it. But again, it's a lengthy job, so by the time they were finished preparing the spices, another Sabbath was on them, the weekly Sabbath. So they had to leave it again and rest according to the Sabbath commandment. They barely had time to finish it, apparently. So now, because the Sabbath was drawing on, they had to wait until after the Sabbath before they could go and anoint Christ's body. So, brethren, Christ could not have been crucified on a Friday. The only other day, he couldn't be crucified on a Monday. He couldn't be crucified on a Saturday. We have 2 days, the Wednesday and the Friday. So we just see he could not have been crucified on a Friday. Because if he was crucified on a Friday, they would have had no time to go and buy spices. He was crucified late in the evening, and we will see that. Now, how can we prove this, that he wasn't crucified on a Friday? Again, notice there were 2 Sabbaths during the week. And that means he could not have been crucified on a Friday, since women prepared spices to anoint his body on the Friday. They bought the spices before he was dead. This is what they would have, because he was dead. You know, that's what they bought the spices. They didn't buy all these spices just for fun. Because he was dead, they bought the spices. And he had to have been dead before the Friday in order for them to go buy the spices. Because if he died the Friday, they didn't know he was going to be executed that day. So he had to have been dead before the Friday for them to go and buy spices. A reason now for buying the spices. So Christ was already dead on the Friday. Not that he died that day. He was already dead by the time the Friday came along. What about the Thursday? Well, Passover never falls on a Thursday, or Tuesday, or Sunday. So he could not have been crucified on a Thursday. Therefore, the only other day that we're left with is a Wednesday. Well, let's do a little proof here. Let's examine how can we prove that he was crucified, he did not die on Good Friday, that he died in fact on a Wednesday. Let's examine the data and then do, as they say in computer science, do some backtracking. Let's say we don't know any of these things to be a fact. Christ is crucified one day. We have that. The day after he is crucified is a Sabbath. Yes? Good. The day following that Sabbath, the women went and they bought spices to make the ointment and then rest. Because the day after they bought the spices is another Sabbath. That would be the weekly Sabbath. Christ is resurrected late on the weekly Sabbath. Therefore, if he is resurrected late on the Sabbath, he is still in the tomb on the Friday. You following me? Yes. He is still in the tomb on the Friday. Therefore, he is still in the tomb on the Thursday, because the Thursday is the first day of unleavened bread. And the women couldn't go and do anything because that day was a Sabbath. And he had to be there 3 days and 3 nights. So he is still in the tomb on the Thursday, the day after his crucifixion. Remember, it follows immediately. The Sabbath that follows, the first day of unleavened bread, is immediately after his crucifixion. So he had to be still there on the Thursday. And therefore, brethren, the old by you know, as we say, we're backtracking. We're backtracking the days. We started from Saturday and we're backtracking the days. He can't be crucified on a Monday. The Passover never falls on a Tuesday. The only day, by logic, brother. Thank God for computer science with backtracking principles. The only day that was left available that he could be crucified was on a Wednesday. And Daniel chapter 9 and verse 27 refers to sacrifice and offerings ceasing in the midst of the week. Why? Because Christ got crucified in the midst of the week. And therefore he made all of the animal sacrifices and the washings, etc. that they had. When you sinned, you had to go and take a dove, and you had different types of grain offerings and meat offerings. All these things ceased to happen. They now became irrelevant because the only thing that could get rid of sin is now sacrifice for you. So he made these things irrelevant. Now let's take a look at his resurrection, brother. Was Christ resurrected on Easter Sunday morning after sunrise? This is what popular Christianity says. This is what they observe. Luke 24, Luke chapter 24. Let's read verse 1. It says, now the first day of the week, very early in the morning, they came to the sepulchre, bringing in the spices which they had prepared. First day of the week. And verse 6 tells us, they came on the first day of the week, early in the morning. Now, how early was that? We're not sure. They didn't say precisely. Verse 6 says, when they got there, they saw two men in shining garments, angels. And one of them said unto him, he is not here. He is risen. So, when the woman went early in the morning, Christ wasn't there on the first day of the week. Let me ask Steffi to put up a little graphic that we have here. That shows you, gives you a kind of a timeline of the events. But the time that, we can just bring it down a little bit. Okay, yeah. Yeah, the time when it says early, it probably was between 5 and 6 o'clock, somewhere there. It was not daylight as yet, but it was early in the morning. 5 o'clock would be perhaps a decent time, somewhere around. So, Matthew 28. Matthew 28, verse 1. It says, in the end of the Sabbath. Now, how long after the end of the Sabbath? It says, as it began to dawn towards the first day of the week, came Mary Magdalene and the other Mary to see the sepulchre. Now, dawn here does not refer to sunrise. Because you remember it says here, as it began to dawn toward the first day of the week. So it isn't referring to when sunrise is approaching. It's talking about when the day is now beginning. The starting first few minutes of the first day of the week. Or just about the time that the sunlight was fading. Now remember, in biblical times, and the way God figures it out, days begin at sunset. When the sun goes down and the darkness is beginning, that is when a new day begins. So around what we would call Saturday evening, the women went to the tomb. Christ wasn't there. Now that is long before Easter Sunday morning. So if they went just after the Sabbath was finished, just after, a couple of minutes, just after, and he's not there. See right around here? This is Sunday. This is what we call Saturday night. In biblical language, however, what we call Saturday night is Sunday night, because the days begin at night time. As I said, the Church of the Empire changed that to make days begin at midnight. But God have days beginning at sunset. So when they went around this time somewhere in here, not Sunday morning, around here, he wasn't there. Let's turn to John chapter 20. John chapter 20. And let's go from verse 1. It says, the first day of the week comes Mary Magdalene early, when it was yet dark, unto the sepulchre, and she saw the stone being taken away. She came early on the first day of the week, while it was yet dark. So this is suggesting probably around 4 o'clock in the morning, Sunday morning, before the sun has risen, somewhere in here. Why do I say that? It's unlikely a woman is going to leave her house to go there 10 o'clock in the night, midnight. They said she came early. And if we're talking about early, early has a reference to when the sun is going to rise. How far away from the sunrise it is. She isn't going to speak, they don't want to reference that when the dead of night is not yet past. The first day of the week, early, while it was yet dark, she went. And then when she got there, she saw that the stone was taken away. So he's already risen when she went there. Christ isn't there. So when did he rise, brother? Obviously, it had to be before the Sabbath ended. Around the time his body was placed in the tomb. Because you remember when he was placed in the tomb, the Sabbath was hastening on. They barely had time to get his body down, wrap him in the clothing, put a little ointment on his body, and then put him in the tomb. And they did that because the Sabbath was hastening on. They didn't want to be caught outside. So maybe half an hour before, at most an hour. That is when he was placed in the tomb. And therefore, in fulfillment of him being 3 days and 3 nights, and he would rise the third day, he was resurrected the Sabbath afternoon. around the same time he was put in the tomb. And that was after, as it says, the 9th hour. I remember the 9th hour was about 3 p.m. The 9th hour, but before sunset. The 9th hour, they only had a few minutes now, a few hours, because Joseph of Arimathea had to go to Pilate to get permission to take his body down. He couldn't just go and grab it, because Christ was now considered, well, he was now with the malefactors, he was a criminal. And you just couldn't take the body of a criminal, as you can't do here if somebody is executed by the state. You just can't go grab the body. They have to give you permission to take it. Luke suggests it would have been closer to sunset, because if you note the words in Luke 23:54, it says, and the Sabbath drew on. It's getting close to the Sabbath. So, brethren, Christ was killed on a Wednesday and rose on the Sabbath just before sunset. Nobody but the gods saw him when he was resurrected. And they were too scared to talk about it. Christ was not resurrected on Sunday morning, Easter or otherwise, because the sign he gave as being the Messiah is he would be in the grave 3 days, are there not 12 hours in a day? And 3 nights, and that he would rise the 3rd day. Those periods, brethren, the 3 days and 3 nights, were the Thursday night, Thursday in the daytime. Remember, the nights come before the day. So he was crucified just before the Thursday, the first day of unleavened bread. He was crucified just before. So the night, he spent the night in the grave. And then Thursday in the daytime. That's the first day of unleavened bread. And then the Friday, when the women went to buy spices, he was there the Friday night. Remember, it would come Thursday night. And Friday in the daytime. 2 days, 2 nights. Saturday night, which would be what we call Friday night. Spent all night. And then Saturday in the daytime. And sometime during the daytime, close to when the time he was placed in the tomb, he was resurrected. So that when the women went just after the Sabbath was finished, he wasn't there. At no time did anybody go to the tomb and find him there. He was resurrected Saturday evening, just before the Sabbath ended, giving us the 3 days and the 3 nights, as he predicted, and paralleling Jonah's experience of being in the belly of the fish for 3 days and 3 nights. And so, brethren, we see how the Empire's church has led the whole world into this deception. And you can have the opportunity to see it yourself. When that week comes along, look and see what happens, and see if it fits. You can go back to this. Check it out for yourself. See if Christ could have been crucified on a Friday. And why is it the same day every year? But the Passover never falls on the same day every year after year after year. Why is that? Again, the empire has changed. And so, brethren, I hope that this will help us to understand the deception that takes place around this time in particular, that the whole world is deceived regarding this. And we ought to be thankful to God that he has given us the understanding that we should not be partakers of that deception.